All right, I just got done working on Caleb coming off of his shoulder surgery. And one of the things that we looked at, I went through a full range of motion assessment, actually total body. And basically looking, he had some limitations in range of motion in right spinal rotation relative to his motion in left rotation, had some limitations in spinal flexion. So there was some relationships between muscle tightness and weakness is basically what I'm looking at. So wherever he can't move, it's telling me that the muscles that move him into that position can't contract efficiently. So when I saw his limitation in right rotation, we checked the obliques, the transverse abdominis, and those muscles all were testing weak from a neuromuscular standpoint. And so got those muscles activated, increased his range of motion and spinal rotation. When you increase the ability for muscles to contract, it increases their ability to contract and contract on demand, but also to do their job to stabilize joints and protect you from injury. Well, obviously now as we move into the shoulder, we had shoulder issues, and after the surgery, I checked his range of motion, and as I went into internal and external rotation, he was pretty limited in internal rotation. External rotation, he was probably getting about 30 to maybe 35 degrees in each direction. Those are your rotator cuff muscles. So basically you got the subscapularis and the infraspinatus. And we got those muscles working, and literally his range of motion increased basically from about here all the way down to basically parallel to the ground. And the same thing relative to external rotation, we're able to significantly increase his range of motion and external rotation. So not only is his motion increasing, but it's due to the increased contractile ability of the muscles, so his strength is increasing. And through manual muscle testing, if I had a force dynamometer, we'd be able to show that he can actually produce more force in those end ranges of motion. But those end ranges of motion are no longer at 35 or 40 degrees, they're actually, at full range of motion. Now he has strength and stability with mobility. So the goal wasn't just to increase his range of motion, it was to increase the contractile capabilities of the muscles so that the muscles could fully contract under load, which in turn gives them more mobility and more stability. The other issues that we saw when I would take him into shoulder flexion, I was getting his arm right down to about his ear, and I would see a grimace on his face, and literally it was tough for him to move into that position. And so then by the time we're done, we're able to get him into a greater range of shoulder flexion. There's some slight pain in that area, but again, the pain isn't when he was moving here where he was really grimacing. Literally give him about 20 more degrees of shoulder flexion. And there's basically 20, when we look at it from a muscle activation standpoint, there's 23 muscles that are involved in him elevating his arm over his head, going into shoulder flexion. The muscles that upwardly rotate the scapula, the rotator cuff muscles that have to hold the head of the humerus and the glenoid, which were treated independently through internal and external rotation. Just various muscles, but 23 divisions of muscles have to be firing and fire on demand in order for him to fully take that arm into shoulder flexion. So we got all of the muscles in the shoulder complex activated, and the end result here is he's got greater range of motion due to greater stability through those ranges of motion. And one thing I always say is whenever you have mobility without stability, you have vulnerability for injury. And it's why people stretch day after day after day and never get any more flexible, because it sounds like he's been doing a lot of work on the mobility side of it, and now he has the stability side of it. And by having that stability, we should see more long-term changes in this flexibility. And now, everything that he does can help reinforce this. The best thing about this is when you have all these neuromuscular weaknesses, like I said, basically inflammation causes these weaknesses, and it alters the communication between the nervous system and the muscle system, so the muscles just can't contract and contract on demand. And so they can't do their job to stabilize the joints and protect from injury. So that causes a protective tightening. And that's kind of like when you walk on ice, the best analogy. When you walk on ice, the body tightens up. So in his shoulder, due to the internal rotators and the external rotators, basically all the muscles in his shoulder being negatively affected by inflammation, he was tight and he was unstable. So now we want to put force on those tissues that are weaker and more unstable. The body just keeps trying to protect, and that's the one thing he said. He felt very vulnerable whenever he was trying to put load on his shoulder. This allows, basically, but the goal of this whole treatment was to melt the ice. Provide a sense of stability, the body will give you all the mobility in the world. It's like, I mean, literally, it's like tightening battery cables. It's just improving that communication between the nervous system and the muscle system so the muscles can fire on demand. The nice part about that is now when he puts force on his body through exercise, it will be like driving your car after you jumpstart your battery. It reinforces it and makes it stronger. Everything he was doing was kind of draining the batteries. Now anything he does from an exercise standpoint should help reinforce it and make it stronger. So basically now we're looking at getting him progressed into some more compound type movements, nothing real specific. We don't need to do isolated exercises because when the muscles can contract, they will contract. And through every compound exercise, those muscles will all be firing and will help to reinforce the strength and stability that we just created today.
And what about rest?
And one of the biggest things I always say is recovery. Recovery is the most important part of exercise. When you have injuries, and I mean, as people age and become more dysfunctional, that recovery time becomes longer. One of the keys when you have injury, you lose the oxidative capacity of the muscles. So recovery is an important factor. Coming in, starting out slow in this progression. We want to start out, I mean, on any type of specific movements, we want at least 3 days of rest before you do the same particular movement. So if he was doing an upper body extra training, I would say, I mean, 2 to 3 days. A lot of times we think, oh, we need to strengthen the rotator cuff. We need to do it every day to get it. There's no muscle more important than any other muscle, and all muscles follow the same principles when it comes to recovery. Is you can load them, but then you have to allow them to recover. So I'd say 2 to 3 days from a training standpoint in between his workouts. But when he gets back trying to pole vault, that's a lot of force being transmitted back in through his shoulder joint. And I'd say every 4 to 5 days is what we're looking at for him to be practicing with the vaulting.